time. I realise that clock isn't just wrong, but it's stopped. So I shall try and kind of not go too quickly, but with a good rate. So I'm going to talk about how quality assurance can learn from distance learning. And I guess what I'm really going to do is just share a philosophy with you, really, that I've developed over the years. And just share kind of my personal reflections on what I've kind of learnt for myself during my own career in higher education, and how that's kind of developed a philosophy for quality assurance and enhancement that I've tried to introduce to the university's quality framework. And really what I want to, the argument I want to put forward is really a counter-argument to a lot of comments I've heard over the years that distance learning is somehow riskier than campus-based provision. And I feel very strongly, and I'll talk you through why, that the principles of quality assurance are just inextricably embedded within distance learning. And actually it's everybody else that needs to learn from you guys. So, I didn't want to kind of write too many bullet points down on this slide, because I want to share with you my own journey away from the quality assurance police. And I'm not too ashamed to admit that when I first started out in higher education in a quality assurance department, my team was known as the QA police. So that is a direct quote. I started my career in the kind of early to mid-90s, and for those of us who can remember back, it was a very different higher education sector that we were working in at the time. It was a very different sector as a whole that we were working in, different national politics at the time. And those of you who will be able to remember back to the early to mid-90s will remember with delight the days of TQA, Teaching Quality Assessment, subject review, and that was my kind of first real exposure to QA in higher education. And it very much seemed to me that QA was all about how many boxes of paper can we produce, how many checklists can we tick off, and how can we suss out the rules of the game so that we can get that magic score of 24 out of 24. And quite quickly everybody kind of guessed how to play the games of TQA and subject review, and everybody did start getting 24. And I guess I was just left with a bad taste in my mouth, because it's not particularly nice to be known as the QA police. And then, kind of, I guess another formative experience, if I fast forward a few more years, I worked at the Royal College of Nursing, and I was responsible for providing support to their distance learning master's programme. And as you can probably guess, with it being RCN, that was a distance learning programme that was offered to registered nurses who were looking for CPD. It was an absolutely amazing experience working there. And I was just blown away, bearing in mind that was my first kind of real hands-on exposure to distance learning, by the amount of care and almost love, actually, that went into the testing and constant refining of learning materials for students. I really was blown away by that. But at the same time, and I can say this because the then University of Manchester validated the degrees at the RCN, even though I could see all that care and time that was being put into the learning materials, as a programme team, we were just being straitjacketed into these QA procedures that, to us, it felt as if they had been, and I think they were, designed for traditional students coming to campus, full-time, 18-year-old. And it felt as if we were really rather straitjacketed by those procedures, and that the work that we'd done within the learning materials, within the students, within the student body, and I think the level of student engagement that we were supporting, that was just totally ignored, because it didn't tick the box of the university's QA procedures. And then fast forward a few more years, I had the chance to join the University of Manchester, initially as Head of Academic Quality. And again, I'm not just saying this, but what really attracted me to that job was the fact that the then Academic Quality Unit was based in the Teaching and Learning Support Office. And that to me sent out a really powerful signal that there was a hope that quality could be based within teaching and learning and be designed to support teaching and learning rather than inhibit it. So when I arrived at Manchester, I had the chance to be involved through the merger of the then Victoria University of Manchester and UMIST in the development of an all-new quality framework for the university. And I really thought, right, this is my chance to bring all of these reflections into developing something new and something that's going to work. So, my definition of quality assurance is up there for you all to see. And to me, what I've seen over the years is that when you boil it down, QA is simply about saying what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, doing it, then reflecting on what you've done and how you've done it, and then learning from that reflection, identifying things that need to be improved, making those improvements and starting all over again. And I would argue that those principles are what you need to design, develop, deliver and run a successful distance learning programme. That's just what you have to do to make it successful. And if I'm going to boil that down even further, I'd talk about quality assurance as a cycle, a learning cycle of processes that support planning, design, implementation, monitoring, evaluation and enhancement. And if you want two words from me instead of a sentence, I describe it as project management. And you cannot deliver good distance learning without superb project management, I would argue. But what about distance learning? So distance learning programmes are characterised by flexibility, and I'm kind of telling you what you already know. They're flexible in terms of time, pace and place. I don't feel I need to elaborate on those particular characteristics further, other than to draw out, in terms of flexibility, flexibility doesn't necessarily mean risk in my head. And also, if I look again at those characteristics, I would argue that a number of those are shared by your kind of traditional, for want of a better word, on-campus provision. And that a large, new undergraduate programme delivering to hundreds of students, and we do have programmes like that at the University of Manchester, that includes a large amount of blended learning that might be targeted at part-time, mature students. I'd argue that that kind of campus-based programme isn't any riskier than a distance learning programme. I'd also just reflect on the quote I've put at the bottom there, which is something that's stayed with me since my time at the Royal College of Nursing. The programme director I worked with at the time always used to say to us, with distance learning, you've got to get it right all of the time. But surely that's the same for any programme. We want to get it right for our students all of the time, or as much of the time as possible. So what I've aimed to do at the University of Manchester is put together a quality framework that's flexible. It doesn't matter whether your programme's distance learning, on campus, offered with a partner. The quality framework should be flexible enough to accommodate your programme, whatever form or shape it takes. And at this point, don't worry, I'm not going to go through and list what our degree, our programme approval process is like, or our periodic review process is like, because even I, as a QA fan, would find that a bit boring myself, so don't worry. Our procedures are up on the website if you really want to look at them. But what I thought I'd share is a set of principles that a group of us back in 2004-05 worked on in a project with the Higher Education Academy. And our hope is, and if any Manchester colleagues here disagree with me when we go through the principles, my hope is that our quality framework, whatever those procedures are, embody all of those principles. So, first of all, we've got to have a quality framework. The university is responsible for its awards, so we do need a framework of QA procedures. But as I mentioned before, that framework has got to be flexible enough to accommodate whatever kind of programme you are. And I think increasingly our degree programmes don't fit neatly into boxes of, well, that's distance learning, that's campus-based. We've got blended learning programmes, we've got MOOCs, there's much more it's kind of innovative programme designs coming on board. And looking at the next bullet point, This is really important to me because, again, if I was to boil that down into one word, the one word would be trust. And I think sort of in a previous world, and I dare say even in the university now, I think trust can be forgotten within the quality framework. You are professionals. You want to provide the best possible teaching, because that's your professional expertise. You want to provide the best possible experience for your students. You don't want to do a bad job. So our quality framework should be based on trust. It shouldn't be asking you to produce reams and reams of paper just for the hell of it. But you're also subject to other pressures. So you haven't got time to produce those hundreds and hundreds of boxes of paper. And processes are based on peer review. You as professionals know what a good programme looks like. You know what a good student experience should be like. This is another particularly important one for me. Our processes are reflective, coming back to the overarching principles I mentioned earlier. And we want our processes to be based on conversation, not confrontation. Because yes, I think in the past, and going back to the QA police, QA procedures, I think way back when, did feel rather confrontational. Certainly they did when sort of in the old days of TQA, it felt as if you somehow had to give the right answer. So we try and break our processes down into opportunities for discussion, and that particularly is the aim during a periodic review, where we're having a more in-depth look at a group of programmes. And that conversation takes the form of, well, you tell us how you think it's going, and then we'll have a conversation around that. Processes are clear but flexible within set boundaries. So we do need some overarching process, but as I say, it's got to be flexible enough to accommodate different types of teaching and learning. Process is efficient, and staff are asked to be honest. This comes back to what I was saying about kind of the sense of, what's the right answer to this question? What if I say something wrong? Because as it says at the bottom, serious mistakes are those you fail to learn from. And I don't want to be putting forward a quality framework where my colleagues don't feel that they can be honest and say, you know what, things don't always go right all of the time. This is the thing that went wrong. This is what we did to remedy it. This is what we've learned from it, and this is how we'll make sure that doesn't happen again. That remains quite a challenging philosophy to ensure is embodied in all of our QA processes. Because as we found, particularly when we first introduced these new procedures back in 2005, and we still find it, that I talk about flexibility, but actually some people feel really uncomfortable with that. They want a set procedure, they want those boxes to tick, and they feel that kind of what we're doing is perhaps a bit too light touch, and that they've got to do something extra, and that, for distance learning, you definitely need to do something more. So I think colleagues, hopefully less so now, but I think at the time did find it quite hard work to get away from that old heavy touch QA approach. And flexibility means that consistency can be hard, if not possible, to achieve. But actually, in terms of a quality framework, I'm quite comfortable with that. The idea of moving from a heavy touch to what some people think of as a light touch, but I would think of as a right touch. Some colleagues think that's a bit kind of half-hearted and not as rigorous as it should be. In response to that, I'd come back and say, well, the QAA thought we were doing pretty well back in 2005 and 2011 when we had our last institutional audit. Our next one is due in 2017, so we'll see what they make of us then. And I think the next big challenge that I see is holding on to this philosophy as we expand our distance learning provision. As a university, we've got around 7,000 distance learning students currently, and I've just been at a meeting of the Distance Learning Strategy Group where colleagues were talking about massive expansion of those numbers. And what I want to fight dearly for as we go forward into that is hanging on to the philosophy, the quality framework I've just described to you, because I do think it will continue to work for that expansion of numbers. And then we're going to end there deliberately to leave time for questions and time in case anybody needs to head off very quickly to catch a train.
Thank you very much.